every way to create a loop using JavaScript. Now we want to start off by creating our array. So we're going to call this array 1. And we're creating this array because these are the values that we're going to use to actually loop through. First loop, and then we are going to specify our second value to be second loop, and these are going to be string values. Creating our for loop using our for keyword, and then the first thing you need to put inside of your parentheses here is your variable declaration, also known as your initialization. All this is a variable that we are going to be using inside of our loop, and the reason I am calling this variable I here is because this is the traditional way to do it, but you can call this variable whatever you like. Just make sure you use the correct variable name in your loop. Secondly, we want to add our semicolon, and then we want to actually specify our condition. So in this case, we want to loop through our entire array here. So what we want to do is use our variable I to actually loop through our array. So we're going to specify I and then less than our array 1 dot length. So array 1 dot length confuses a lot of people, especially beginners, because arrays are zero index, meaning this is going to be 0 and this is going to be 1 when it comes to our index. But when you specify array 1 dot length, it actually counts starting at 1. So array 1 dot length is actually equal to 2. Then what we want to do is actually increment our value of I here, and you don't necessarily have to only increment it by 1 like I'm doing here using I++. You can increment it by 2, by 4, by whatever you guys need to increment it by, but in our case we want to use each value from our array, so we only want to increment by 1. Now we're going to use our curly brackets here, and what I want to do is create a variable called text so you guys can really see what's going on here. So I'm going to specify a string, and then I'm going to say this loop has run, and I'm going to add a space, and then I'm going to concatenate using the plus sign. Then I'm going to specify I, but keep in mind I is equal to 0, so we don't want this to print out 0 to our console because that wouldn't make any sense. We want this to print out this loop has run 1 times, right? So what we need to do is actually add 1 here to our variable, and then we also need to put this in parentheses simply because we need this to run before it concatenates with our string here. So now what I'm going to do is concatenate another string at the end and simply say times. Then we're going to go ahead console.log this message out like so by console.logging our text here, and we're going to save that. And now you guys can see it's going to display this loop has run 1 times, this loop has run 2 times. So what this is doing essentially is it's going into our for loop and it's declaring I equal to 0, and then it's saying is 0 less than 2 because 1, 2 is equal to our array dot length. And then it's skipping our incrementing value here, and then it's saying this loop has run I plus 1 times. Our I value is 0, then it adds 1, and that's what you guys are seeing right here, and then we're logging it out. Then when we go back up again to run our loop for the second time, I is going to be incremented now because it is not incremented until the loop has run 1 time. So now I is equal to 1, and then it's going to say, okay, 1 is less than 2 because that's our array 1 dot length. Then it's going to run I plus 1, which in this case is going to be 1 plus 1. Then it's going to log it out. Then it's going to add 1 to 1, and then it's going to run our condition again, but 2 is not less than 2, so it's going to stop looping through. Now I want to show you guys how you can actually console.log out the value from the array here. So what we want to do is concatenate our array 1, and then we want to specify the index of our array that we want to print using our I value here. So keep in mind I is equal to 0 and the first index in our array is 0, so we don't need to add 1 here. We can simply leave it like this. And now you guys will be able to see that first loop, which is our first value, and second loop, which is our second value, is successfully displaying. Again, let us know if you have any comments. If it's a bit confusing, that's perfectly normal, so don't be discouraged. Just let us know if you have any questions. Now we're going to get into our for each loop. So to specify this, what we want to do is actually start off with our array variable first, and this is going to be used for iterating specifically through arrays. And then once you specify your array here, what you want to do is go ahead and type dot for each, and then this is going to now take a callback function. So we are going to specify our callback function now, and all that means is that we're going to put a function here specifying what we want this to do. In our case, we want to use our value and our index from our array. Now we want to create our curly brackets, and then we simply want to create our text variable again, and then make this equal to this loop has run. And then we're going to again add our index, and we're going to get our index value through our index variable here. Then we again want to add 1 because we're starting off at 0 because arrays are 0 indexed. Then we want to wrap this in parentheses because we want this code to run before it is concatenated with our string here. Then what we want to do is specify one more string, just like so, specifying times. And then I messed it up, so I'll go back and fix that. And then I also need to add my plus sign here. Now we're gonna go ahead and log this out to our console by specifying console.log text. Now you guys will see that it says this loop has run 1 time and this loop has run 2 times. So what's happening here is we're first taking our array, which you guys can see here. Then we're specifying for each, and if you hover over it, it will actually give you some information about it here. Then we are actually creating our callback function here that is going to take the parameters value and index, which in our case, our values are here, and then our index are 0 and 1, because again, arrays are 0 indexed. Then we are specifying our index here, but again, it starts at 0, so we need to add 1 to actually display 1. Then we're looping back through this again, but now with our second index, which is 1. Then if you want to actually display the value from this array, you can simply write out your value parameter here, and now the value from your specified array will successfully print out here. So first it runs through 1 time, displays this. Then it runs through using our second index and displays this. Again, if you guys have any questions, please reach out. Now let's get into using a while loop. To use a while loop, you first need to declare a variable, and in our case, we're going to call this while val, which is for our while loop value. We're going to initialize this to 0. Then we're going to go down, create our while loop by specifying while. Then within our parentheses here is where our condition is going to sit. So we want to use our while value, which is 0, and then we want to run this for when our array1.length. So when our while value is less than array1.length, we want to run the code inside of this curly bracket. So basically what it's saying right now is it's saying run this code because 0, which is here, is less than our array1.length, which again is 1, 2 here. Now what we want to do is create our text variable again, and then specify this loop has run, and then we want to say how many times it has run by simply adding our while value here. But again, our while value is 0, so we need to go ahead and add 1. Then we need to add parentheses around this because we need this to run before it is concatenated with our string. Then what we need to do is just add a simple string at the end here and say times again. Now what we want to do is console.log our text variable to our console like so. But what you don't want to forget to do is increment your value here at the end, because if you don't, you're going to get into what's called an infinite loop, meaning that your loop will never stop because you're not incrementing it, and it will crash your browser. So what we want to do is refresh our page now, and then it says this loop has run 1 time, this loop has run 2 times. And so basically what it is doing is it's taking while value, which is 0, putting it here saying 0, then it's testing if 0 is less than 2 because our array1.length is 2 here, and then it is running our code, adding 1 to 0 again, and then 1 is less than 2, running our code again, adding 1 more, and then 2 is obviously not less than 2. So that's why our loop only runs 2 times in this specific case. If you guys have questions about the while loop, please reach out to us through the comments and we will help you out. Now we're going to get into our do while loop, and what you need to do is specify a variable first. So we're going to call this do while val to be extra specific, so you guys can see exactly what's going on. And we're going to initialize this variable to 0. And then we're going to start off with our do keyword. And the cool thing about this loop is that it will run whether or not it's true or false, meaning whether the condition is true or false or not, because the condition is going to be down here at the end. And to specify our condition, we're going to type while, then our parentheses, and we want to type our do while value, which again is equal to 0. Then we want to run this loop for when our do while loop is less than array1.length, and again our array1.length is equal to 2. Now we want to declare a brief variable called text, and we want to make this equal to this loop has run, and then we want to specify our do while value here. But again, we need to put this in parentheses to avoid any issues, because what we need to do is actually add 1 to this, because again our do while value is 0, so it wouldn't make sense if it says this loop has run 0 times. So that's all we're doing here, and then we're going to specify times here like so. Now what we want to do is console.log out our text. And again, you want to be sure that you increment your do while value here, because if you do not, you're going to get into an infinite loop, and again it's going to crash your browser and it's not going to work the way you expected it to work. So now if we refresh our page, it's going to say this loop has run 1 times, this loop has run 2 times. So what's happening here is your do while loop is going to run right off the bat whether your condition is true or false or not, and then it's going to check your condition, and when it gets down here it will not run again if this condition is false. But the do while loop will always run at least 1 time even if your condition is false. Now I want to show you guys how you can actually display your array values. What you can do is use your array1 here, and then what you want to do is specify your do while value to actually specify your index here. So it's going to start at 0, which is going to be first loop here. Now if we go ahead and save this, you're going to see that it displays first loop and second loop, which are our respective values in our array going through each loop. So your line of code is going to run 1 time and then 2 times, because that's the way we have our conditions set. Once this gets to 2, 2 is not less than 2, so it's not going to run a third time here. But now let's say we just throw something in here random. So if we make do while equal to 3, 3 is obviously not less than our array1.length, which is 2. But what's going to happen here once we save, you're going to notice here is that our code still runs, and it says this loop has run 4 times. Simply because our do while value is now 3 and 3 plus 1 is 4. So this is running 1 time even though our condition is false, but then once it gets to our condition and checks that, it will not run again. This is useful in certain circumstances, so it's good to learn it now. Let us know if you guys have any questions about the do while loop, and we would be happy to help you out. Now we're going to get into our for in loop, and the for in loop is going to be used for specifically looping through objects, not arrays. Up until now we've been going through arrays, but now we actually want to loop through an object. So what we're going to do is we are going to create an object variable here. We're simply going to call this object1, and now make this equal to our specified object. And for our case, we're simply going to say key1 val1, so you guys can really see what is going on here. And then we're going to specify key2 here, like so, make this capitalized. And then we are going to say val2, so you guys can really understand what is going on here. Now we want to start off with our for keyword again. So now we want to declare key using our let keyword here, and our key is going to be equal to the keys in our object. So key 1 and key 2, that's why I called these keys. Now we want to specify in what object, so we're going to use our in keyword and then type in object1. Now what we want to do here is we want to create our text value again, and we want to specify this is, and then we want to actually print out our key value here, like so. So we're going to specify key, and then we want to also add our key value, so val1 and val2. So we're going to go, and this is our object1 and then our key here. So what this is going to do is this is going to display our key values, so key 1 and key 2, and then object1 followed by key is going to display val1 and val2 for our values. Then we simply want to console.log our text, and in this case we do not need to increment our values here. It's automatically done, so you won't run into an infinite loop in this case. And now you guys can see it displays this is key 1 and this is val1, then this is key 2 and this is val2. So what's happening is you're looping through your object here using your key and object1 here, and then you're running through grabbing the key, which is in our case key 1 here, then you're grabbing your key value, which in our case for the first one is val1, and then you're console.logging it out again, and then you do it one more time. If you add more key value pairs to your object here, it will print them all out to your console based on this loop. If you guys have questions about using the for in loop for objects, go down in the comments and let us know, and we'll be happy to help you out. Now we're going to move on to our for of loop, and this loop is used specifically for arrays. It's really similar to a normal for loop, going to be a more concise way of writing our loop. To create this, we want to start off with our for keyword followed by our parentheses, declare our variables here using our let keyword, and now we actually want to create an array here because we want to pass the index and the value from our array into this for of loop here. So we're going to type index and then we're going to type value. And now we want to specify our array that we're going to use using the of keyword, and then we want to specify array1, and then if you only leave this as array1, you're going to run into issues. What you need to do is turn array1 into key value pairs so you can actually display both the array index and value by typing entries followed by your parentheses, and this is going to be an array method that we're going to be using. Now what we want to do is create our text variable one more time, make this equal to this loop has run, and then we want to specify our index, but we need to add 1 to our index because again arrays are 0 index, and we need to add our parentheses so this line of code runs before it adds our string. And then the mistake that I made is that this parenthesis actually needs to go right at the end of this portion here. So this needs to be written exactly how I have it. Then we're going to add our times at the end, and then we now want to specify the values of our array by simply adding our value at the end. And now we want to console.log our text variable just like so. Go ahead and save that, and now you guys can see this loop has run 1 time, first loop. This loop is run 2 times for our second loop. So what's happening here is we are taking our array 1 and then we're converting that into key value pairs. And you guys can see what that does by simply typing out array1 dot entries over here, and now it will show you guys, and I actually need to add my parentheses here, so it will show you guys that this is creating an array iterator, and it's creating the values that you need to actually use this for of loop. So now what happens is we take our array, create our key value pairs, and then we take our index and the values from our array. Then we are simply putting our index here and adding 1, so it displays 1 here, and then we are displaying our value from our array here. Then we're logging out this entire message, and then we are running our loop again. And this type of loop does not need to be incremented. It's only going to run for the amount of indices that you have in your specified array. So in our case, it's going to run twice because we have 2 values within our array 1, and that's why it's running 2 times. If you guys have any questions about using the for of loop in JavaScript, let us know down below in the comments. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Reach out to us through this video or go to our website at kalmanwebdesign.com if you have any questions or need any help. Thanks for watching.